twin suns of the desert planet burned the land into golden ash. Wind carried dust like ghosts across the endless dunes. A human man named Ethan Cross walked alone through the wasteland, his old jacket torn, his water almost gone. He had been a soldier once, a traveler now, looking for something worth saving in a galaxy that had forgotten mercy. When he spotted the smoke, he thought it was another crashed trader ship, but as he got closer, his instincts turned sharp. The smell of burnt metal and something worse, blood, filled the air. He raised his rifle and moved slowly toward the wreck. The metal hull was torn open, scorch marks showing signs of blaster fire. Then he heard it. A sound too soft to be an engine, too human to be a machine. A cry. He stepped inside. The lights flickered weakly, revealing cages stacked against the walls. Inside those cages were alien bodies, some small, some large, most lifeless. Slave collars blinked faintly on their necks. Ethan clenched his jaw. He'd seen this before. The galaxy's dark trade, where living beings were sold like cattle. He hated it. Then, from the far end, he heard another faint sound, a trembling breath. He followed it and found a small alien girl, maybe 12 years old by human measure, curled up inside a cage. Her skin had a pale shimmer, her silver eyes wide with fear. When she saw him, she pressed herself against the back wall and hissed like a cornered animal. "Hey," Ethan said quietly, lowering his weapon. "I'm not one of them. I'm here to help." She didn't understand his words, but his tone made her pause. The girl was shaking, a metal collar tight around her neck. Ethan knelt beside the cage, pulling a small tool from his belt. "Hold still," he said softly. "I'll get you out." The door's lock sparked as he worked. He could hear the hum of engines in the distance, other ships coming back. The slave traders weren't done here. Time was short. The lock snapped open with a click. The girl didn't move. Ethan reached out his hand slowly, palm open. "Come on," he said, voice calm, gentle. "You're free now." For a long moment she stared at him. Then with trembling fingers she reached for his hand. Her touch was cold, fragile like glass. He pulled her out carefully and lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light. That's when the shouting started outside. The traders had returned, 4 of them, heavily armed. Ethan ducked behind a cargo crate, setting the girl down behind him. His rifle was old, his ammo low. He took a deep breath and peeked around the corner. "Check the cages," one of the slavers shouted. "The girl's worth a fortune." Ethan cursed under his breath. He had 2 choices: run and leave the girl, or fight and maybe die. He looked at her terrified eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light. Something in his chest hardened. He chose to fight. As the first slaver stepped through the wreck's doorway, Ethan fired. The shot burned through the man's chest. Chaos exploded. The others returned fire, lasers ripping through metal. Ethan ducked, rolled, and shot again. His aim was steady, his movements fast despite his age. The girl covered her ears, trembling, whispering something in her language. Ethan took another shot, hitting a second trader. The last 2 charged in with blades, shouting curses. Ethan's rifle clicked empty. He swung it like a club, breaking one man's jaw. The other stabbed him in the side, pain sharp, hot, but Ethan drove a knife through the slaver's armor before falling to one knee. Silence. Only his ragged breathing filled the room. The girl crawled to him, tears running down her face. She pressed her small hands against his wound, her touch glowing faintly blue. He didn't understand how, but the pain dulled a little. "You're safe now," he whispered, brushing her hair gently. "We have to go." He carried her out of the wreck, limping toward his ship hidden in the dunes. Blaster smoke rose behind them. The suns were setting, painting the sand red like blood. Inside his small freighter, Ethan sealed the door and started the engines. The ship groaned to life. The girl sat quietly beside him, watching the stars through the viewport. She looked lost, scared, and yet curious. He opened a small med kit and patched his wound. She pointed at the bandage, then at herself, whispering her name softly. Lyra. Lyra, he repeated, nodding with a small smile. I'm Ethan. She tilted her head, still wary but no longer afraid. For the first time, she spoke another word in broken English. Why, save me? Ethan looked at her, his tired eyes meeting hers. Because no one else would, he said. The engines roared as the ship rose into the dark sky. Behind them, the wreck burned, lighting the desert like a dying sun. Ethan didn't know who the girl truly was or what fate awaited them both. But something deep inside told him this rescue was only the beginning of a story that would change the stars themselves. The stars stretched endlessly across the black sky as Ethan's small freighter cut through the emptiness. Inside, the lights flickered dimly. The alien girl, Lyra, sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket much too big for her small frame. She watched him quietly, her silver eyes wide and alert. Ethan flew in silence. His side still hurt from the fight, but he hid the pain. The galaxy was cruel, and kindness was a weakness few could afford. But tonight, he didn't care about that. He just wanted to keep this little girl safe. After hours of flying, he landed on an old mining outpost hidden inside a canyon on a dead planet. No one lived there anymore. No traders, no patrols, just silence and wind. It was the perfect place to disappear. He helped Lyra out of the ship. She hesitated at the door, staring at the strange, barren world around her. He smiled gently. It's not much, he said, but it's safe. She didn't understand the words, but his tone told her enough. She followed him inside the metal shelter. It was small and broken, but Ethan fixed it up with what he had. He built a fire in the corner and warmed some food. The smell of soup filled the air. Lyra sat close to the fire, her hands open to the warmth. She looked so small, almost lost in the shadows. Ethan sat across from her, speaking softly. You'll be all right here. No one will hurt you again. She didn't reply, but slowly reached for the bowl he offered. Her fingers brushed his. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The fear in her eyes faded a little. Days passed, then weeks. Ethan taught her small words. Food, fire, water, safe. She tried to copy his voice, her accent soft and musical. Sometimes she laughed when she got a word wrong. Ethan found himself smiling more than he had in years. She learned to help him repair the shelter, to cook, to gather parts from wrecks nearby. Her body healed, her hair grew long and silver again, shining under the sun. Sometimes she hummed songs from her world, though he couldn't understand the words. At night they sat by the fire. Ethan would tell stories about Earth, about the oceans, the rain, and the sound of trees. Lyra listened like a child hearing magic for the first time. One evening, as the storm winds howled outside, Lyra looked at him and said softly, "Teacher." Ethan blinked. "Teacher?" She nodded and smiled. "You, teacher. I learn." He chuckled quietly. "Then you're my student." Her smile grew brighter. For the first time she laughed, a soft, bright sound that filled the empty outpost with life. But peace never lasted long in the galaxy. A signal blinked on Ethan's old scanner one night, a coded frequency, unknown ships nearby. He froze, checking the data. The slavers were searching this region again. They were looking for her. He turned off the lights and shut down all power. Lyra noticed his change in tone and touched his arm. "Bad?" she asked. "Yes," he said quietly. "Very bad." He packed supplies fast and loaded them into a small emergency pod hidden behind the outpost wall. Lyra followed, confused and scared. "You have to go," Ethan told her firmly. "They're coming. You'll be safe out there. There's a station far from here. They'll take care of you." She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "No, with you." He knelt and placed his hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me, Lyra. You have to live. Don't let them take you again. Promise me." She started to cry, clutching his jacket. teacher come too?" He smiled sadly. "I can't. Someone has to stop them from following you." He guided her into the small pod. Her tears fell silently. Ethan closed the hatch, trying not to show his pain. He whispered through the glass, "Live free, no matter what happens." The engines of the pod started. Lyra pressed her small hand against the window. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice shaking. He looked back, his face lit by the glow of the pod. "Goodbye, kid," he said. The pod launched upward into the night sky, leaving a bright trail behind. Ethan watched until it vanished among the stars. Then he turned toward the horizon where the slavers' ships were landing. He picked up his rifle and walked into the storm. Lyra, drifting through the dark in her small pod, cried quietly. But inside her heart, something burned. A promise. One day she would come back. One day she would find him again, and when she did, the galaxy would remember the name Ethan Cross. The years passed like fading stars. The galaxy changed. Empires rose and fell. But on a quiet farming world called Tyran 4, an old human named Ethan Cross lived in silence. He built himself a small cabin near the green hills. He grew food, fixed broken machines for neighbors, and spent evenings watching the twin suns sink below the horizon. His hair had turned gray, his hands were scarred and rough. The war, the rescue, the girl named Lyra, all had become distant memories that haunted his dreams. Every night when the wind blew through the dry grass, he still heard her voice saying, "Teacher, with you." He would look up at the stars and whisper, "I hope you made it, kid." Far above those same stars, another world shone brighter than ever before. Verelion Prime, the capital of a new interstellar empire. From the ashes of slavery, a queen had risen. Her name was Queen Lyra of Verelion, ruler of 7 star systems, destroyer of the slave networks, protector of the free. Across the galaxy, her name was spoken with awe and fear. Some said she was divine, some said she was merciless. But none knew that once, long ago, she was a frightened child saved by a human's kindness. Back on Tyran 4, Ethan sat outside his cabin one quiet morning, listening to the hum of a cargo ship passing high above. He thought it was just another trader ship, until the sky darkened. 5 large royal vessels entered orbit, their hulls glowing with golden light. Birds scattered in fear. Farmers stopped in their fields. The ships were marked with the sigil of the Verelion Empire, the silver star crown of Queen Lyra. Ethan frowned. "What in the world?" he muttered. The ground trembled as one of the ships landed near the town. Armed soldiers in shimmering armor stepped out, their faces hidden behind masks. The people gathered, whispering nervously. No one had ever seen royal soldiers here before. An officer spoke through a translator. "We seek a man named Ethan Cross." Ethan froze. The crowd turned toward him. He stood slowly, confused. "That's me," he said. The officer bowed his head respectfully. "Our queen commands your presence immediately," the villagers gasped. Ethan felt a strange chill. "Your queen?" he asked. "Yes," the soldier said. "She claims you once saved her life." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He stared at the sky where the ships waited. Could it be? After 20 long years? The little girl with silver eyes? Before he could think more, the soldiers guided him to their shuttle. As it lifted off, he looked down at his small home growing smaller below. He felt old and out of place, his hands trembling as he held onto the seat. The shuttle entered the flagship's hangar. The doors opened to a grand hall filled with alien guards and banners of silver and blue. At the far end stood a throne, high, radiant, carved from crystal. And there, sitting upon it, was her. The queen's armor shone under the light. Her hair, long and silver like moonlight, fell over her shoulders. Her eyes were the same soft gray he remembered. She rose slowly and walked toward him. The guards bowed their heads, but she didn't stop. She crossed the hall, her steps echoing in the silence. Ethan stood frozen. She stopped just in front of him. Then she did something no one in that hall expected. She knelt. The crowd gasped. A queen kneeling before a human. Her voice trembled, full of emotion. "You once saved a frightened child," she said. "You gave her life when no one else would." Ethan's breath caught. "Lyra," he whispered. She looked up at him and smiled softly. "I kept my promise, teacher." I lived free. The hall was silent. Ethan's old eyes filled with tears as he looked at the girl he had once carried from the wreckage. Now she was a queen, powerful and proud. She stood and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You told me to live," she said, "so I built a world where no one would ever live in chains again." Ethan didn't know what to say. He simply nodded, his heart heavy and proud all at once. Lyra turned toward the court. "This human is not a guest," she declared. "He is the reason I stand here. Treat him as you would treat me." The hall erupted in thunderous applause. Ethan stood there in awe, the sound washing over him. After 20 years of silence, the promise he once made under burning suns had come full circle. And deep in his heart, he finally whispered, "You made it, kid." The grand hall of the Varelian flagship shimmered with silver light. Thousands of crystal lamps hung above like frozen stars. Alien nobles and soldiers filled the space, all standing silent as the queen led an old human man to the center of the hall. Ethan Cross felt every eye on him. His boots echoed against the marble floor. He had faced soldiers, storms, and slavers in his life, but never a scene like this. The girl he once saved was now the ruler of worlds. He looked at her, unsure whether to bow or speak. Lyra turned to face her people. Her crown caught the light, casting faint reflections across the floor. "This man," she said, her voice calm but powerful, "once gave his life for a stranger. He did not know who I was, yet he saved me from chains and death." The hall remained silent. No one dared move. Ethan felt a strange warmth inside. He could still see the child she once was in her face, though now her eyes carried the weight of galaxies. Lyra stepped closer and lowered her head slightly. "Teacher," she said softly, "I never forgot." He blinked, trying to speak. You really made it," he said in disbelief. She smiled gently. "Because you told me to live free, I did. I built a world where no child will ever wear a collar again." Ethan looked around. The guards, the nobles, the banners, and all symbols of her rule. He realized she had truly changed everything. "You did good, kid," he whispered, his voice cracking. She looked at him with a soft sadness. "You still call me kid?" He chuckled weakly. "You'll always be the girl I carried through the sand." The crowd behind them exchanged confused glances, not understanding the quiet exchange between their queen and the human. But Lyra ignored them. She turned to her attendants. "Prepare chambers for him," she ordered. "He will stay here as my honored guest." Later that evening, in the royal quarters, the two sat by a window overlooking the endless stars. The noise of the court faded far behind. Ethan held a cup of alien tea, unsure if he liked the taste. Lyra sat across from him, her armor replaced with a simple gown of silver cloth. She looked younger, almost peaceful. "I searched for you for years," she said. "When I became queen, the first thing I did was destroy the slavers who once hunted us. I found their ships, their leaders. I ended them." Ethan nodded slowly. "You did what I couldn't." She looked down at her hands. "But I lost people too. Every victory cost lives. Every war left scars. Sometimes I wonder if freedom ever comes without blood." Ethan sighed. "It doesn't. But what matters is what you do with it afterward." She studied him quietly. "You still speak like a soldier," he smiled faintly. "I was one once. Now I'm just an old man who fixes broken things." Lyra shook her head gently. "You fixed me." The words hit him harder than any wound he had ever taken. For a moment, neither spoke. The stars outside shimmered softly. Then Lyra rose and walked to a cabinet. She opened it and brought out a small object wrapped in cloth. "I kept this," she said. Ethan unfolded the cloth and saw an old, rusty dog tag, his old military tag. "You still have this?" he asked. She nodded. "You dropped it the day you sent me away. I found it in the wreck after the slavers came back. I swore I would return it to you when I was strong enough." He smiled, holding the tag tightly. "You really are full of surprises." She sat beside him again, closer this time. "You taught me kindness when I thought the galaxy had none," she said. "Now let me repay you. Stay here with me. Let me take care of you as you once took care of me." Ethan looked at her with tired eyes. "You don't owe me anything." She shook her head. "It's not debt. It's love. A daughter's promise to her teacher." The old soldier couldn't speak. His throat tightened. Outside, the royal fleet drifted silently across the stars. Inside that quiet chamber, two souls, one human, one alien, sat together after 20 years of waiting, and for the first time in decades, Ethan felt at peace. But somewhere deep in the shadows of the ship, unseen eyes watched their reunion with hate. The past had not forgotten him. The next morning, the palace of Verelion glowed beneath the golden light of its twin suns. From the tower balcony, Ethan looked down at the city spread out like a sea of silver and crystal. Thousands of alien citizens filled the streets chanting the Queen's name. The sound rose like thunder across the horizon. Lyra stood beside him, dressed in royal armor that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. Her crown was gone. Today she wore only a simple braid that reminded Ethan of the young girl he once knew. "You built all this," he said quietly. "From nothing," she smiled faintly. "I built it from pain," she said. "And from your words," he turned to her. "My words?" She nodded. "You told me to live free. I swore no one in my empire would live in chains again. So I gave them hope even if I had to fight to earn it." Ethan watched her face as she spoke. Her eyes were steady but carried exhaustion, the kind only leaders knew. He had seen it in soldiers before, that hidden weight of power. "Freedom always comes with a price," he said softly. "You've paid it, haven't you?" Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she looked out at the distant skies, her expression darkening. "There are still people who want to see me fall," she finally said. "Old enemies, old masters, the ones who ruled the slave markets before I destroyed them." Ethan frowned. "You mean the slavers survived?" She turned to him slowly. "Not all of them, but some escaped. They've been waiting for the right moment to strike. My spies say one of them has already entered my court, hiding behind a mask of loyalty." Ethan's instincts sharpened. "You think someone inside the palace is working for them?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, and they know about you." He stared at her. "About me?" She stepped closer, her voice low. "When I brought you here, it changed everything. For years, no one believed the Queen had once been a slave. Now the truth is spreading, and the people love you, the human who saved their queen. That makes you a target." Ethan stayed silent for a moment, processing her words. Then he gave a small, tired smile. "Guess some things never change. Trouble always finds me." Lyra didn't smile back. "I won't let them hurt you," she said firmly. "You'll have guards with you at all times." "I don't need guards," he said. "I need answers." Her gaze softened. "Then help me find them. Be my advisor, Ethan. Help me see through the lies. You've seen more war and deceit than anyone here." He hesitated. The idea of becoming part of an empire again, even for good reasons, felt heavy. He had left that life behind long ago. But when he looked at her, the same girl he had once carried through the sand, he knew he couldn't say no. He nodded. "All right, Your Majesty, but only because you still can't stay out of trouble." She smiled again, relief flickering in her eyes. Then it settled. "You'll sit beside me during the council meeting tomorrow." As they walked through the palace halls, guards bowed deeply. The Queen's presence filled every space she entered. But Ethan noticed something else. Fear. Servants moved quickly, eyes low. Whispers followed them like shadows. Later that night, while Lyra prepared for the council, Ethan wandered into the royal archive. The walls were lined with holographic records of wars, trade deals, and hidden reports. One file caught his attention, a report marked with the seal of the old slave network. He tapped it open. The image that appeared froze his blood. It showed the wreck of the ship where he had found Lyra 20 years ago. But there was something else. A second file attached labeled Recovered Asset Human Target. Ethan scrolled through, his heart pounding. It listed his name, his home planet, and a bounty order placed on him by someone still alive, Lord Varen, one of the original slaver lords. He shut the file quickly, his jaw tight. So the past wasn't done with him yet. He turned only to see a shadow moving near the door. A tall figure slipped away before he could call out. Someone had been watching. Ethan hurried back to Lyra's chamber. She was standing by the window, her reflection glowing in the glass. "They're here," he said quietly. "The slavers. They've already infiltrated your palace." Lyra didn't look surprised. "I know," she whispered. "I was waiting for them to make a move." Ethan looked at her in disbelief. "You knew?" She turned, her face calm but her eyes blazing. "I'm not the frightened child you saved, Ethan. I'm the queen they fear most, and now they've come right into my hands." For a moment, Ethan saw both sides of her, the gentle girl and the powerful ruler. And somewhere deep inside, he knew the storm was coming. The palace of Verelion stood silent under the twin moons. The air was heavy like the calm before a storm. Inside the Grand Hall, hundreds of guests gathered for the Queen's Unity Ceremony, the annual celebration of freedom. Music filled the air, lights shimmered across crystal walls, and banners waved high above the crowd. Ethan stood near the entrance, dressed in simple robes Lyra had given him. He felt out of place among the nobles with their jeweled crowns and glowing skin, yet everywhere he turned, people whispered about him, the human who had once saved their queen. At the far end, Lyra appeared in a gown of silver and white. Her crown rested lightly on her head, her expression calm yet watchful. The crowd bowed deeply as she stepped onto the platform. She raised her hand and the hall grew silent. "Today," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber, "we celebrate 20 years of freedom. Once we were slaves. Today we stand as rulers of our own fate. Let no one forget the price we paid." Cheers erupted, echoing through the vast hall. Lyra smiled faintly, but her eyes flicked toward Ethan for a moment. A silent signal. He nodded slightly, his soldier's instincts awake. He could feel something was wrong. The musicians started again, but the sound felt too loud, too forced. Ethan's eyes moved across the crowd. Too many guards. Too many unfamiliar faces. Then he saw it. A man near the corner wearing servant robes, his hand gripping something metallic beneath the tray he carried. Ethan's heart jumped. "Lyra," he whispered under his breath. Before she could react, a blast shook the hall. The explosion came from the balcony above, showering glass and flame across the room. Screams filled the air as chaos erupted. Guards rushed forward, drawing weapons. Ethan sprinted toward the stage. Another explosion hit the side wall, sending people running in every direction. Smoke covered the hall, thick and choking. Through the haze, shadowy figures appeared, assassins in black armor. Their eyes glowed red beneath their masks. They fired plasma bolts toward the throne. Ethan tackled Lyra to the ground as a blast scorched the marble where she had stood a second earlier. He pulled her behind a pillar, grabbing a fallen guard's weapon. "Stay low," he said quickly. Lyra's voice was steady even as chaos raged. "They're not after me. They want you," he frowned. "Then they'll have to earn it." He peeked around the pillar and fired 3 quick shots. 2 assassins fell, but more poured in from the shattered doors. The smell of burning crystal filled the air. Lyra rose, her eyes glowing faintly with silver energy. Her people had always possessed strange power, one she rarely used in front of others. But now she let it rise. Light shimmered around her like a storm of stars. With a gesture, the floor trembled, throwing several attackers off their feet. Ethan watched in awe as she fought beside him, graceful, fierce, unstoppable. Yet he could see the fatigue in her movements. Then he spotted movement behind her. A tall man in dark armor stepped from the smoke, his voice cold and full of hate. "You cost me everything, human." Ethan turned sharply. The man's face was scarred, one eye replaced with a red lens. He recognized him instantly. Lord Varen, the slaver whose bounty he had seen in the records. Varen raised his blaster. "You took my prize 20 years ago. Now I'll take her kingdom from you." Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the weapon. "You'll have to go through me first," Varen smirked. "Gladly." The blast hit Ethan square in the chest. The sound echoed across the hall. Lyra screamed as he fell backward, the weapon slipping from his hand. She rushed to his side, her hands glowing with desperate energy, trying to stop the bleeding. Ethan's voice was faint but calm. "It's all right. You still have a world to protect." Varen aimed again, but before he could fire, Lyra unleashed a blinding wave of energy. The light exploded through the hall, shattering walls and throwing the slaver across the floor. When the dust cleared, Varen lay motionless, defeated. Guards stormed in, capturing the remaining assassins. The hall fell silent except for the crackle of burning banners. Lyra knelt beside Ethan, tears streaking down her face. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered. He smiled weakly. "You were never my mistake. You were my hope." His hand slipped from hers. The Queen of 7 Systems held the only man she ever called father, her tears falling on his still face. Outside, the twin moons glowed softly, their light passing through the shattered glass of the palace. The night that began with celebration ended in silence, and the birth of legend. The dawn came slowly to Verelion Prime. Smoke from the attack still drifted across the royal city, rising in thin gray lines that reached toward the pale sky. The palace stood wounded yet unbroken. Guards and healers filled the halls, tending to the injured, cleaning the ruins. But inside the throne chamber, silence ruled. Ethan Cross lay upon a white stone bed in the center of the hall. His face was calm, his hands folded across his chest. He looked almost peaceful, as if he had simply fallen asleep. The lights from the windows painted soft gold on his weathered skin. Queen Lyra stood beside him. Her crown was gone, her armor scorched. She hadn't slept since the night before. She didn't speak, didn't move, only stared at him. Around them, her generals and advisors waited in silence, unsure if they should stay or leave. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. He died protecting me, protecting us all. I owe him everything. The hall remained still. Even the guards lowered their heads in respect. Lyra looked at the stars beyond the great window. When I was a child, I was nothing but a number to the slavers. He gave me a name. He gave me a life. Her words trembled, but she didn't let tears fall. Now I'll give him what he gave me, freedom that never ends. She turned toward her council. Prepare a monument, she ordered. Not of a warrior, but of a savior. A human who proved that mercy is stronger than power. Her generals bowed deeply. Yes, Your Majesty. Days passed. Across the empire, news of Ethan's death spread. Worlds mourned the human who had once saved their queen. Songs were written about him. Children learned his name before they could even speak. In every city, candles burned in his honor. Lyra attended none of the ceremonies. She stayed alone in her private garden, the same place Ethan had once helped her plant years ago. The flowers there glowed softly in the moonlight, untouched by the chaos outside. Each night she would sit beside a small stone bearing his name. Ethan Cross, it read, the man who freed a queen. She spoke to it as if he were still there. You'd laugh at all this, wouldn't you? You never wanted statues or songs. You just wanted peace. She smiled sadly. You were always simple like that. But peace was not what she felt. Not yet. Weeks later, the monument was complete. It stood in the center of the capital, a towering sculpture of Ethan standing tall with one hand extended forward, as if offering help to the world. The people called it the Guardian of Freedom. On the day of its unveiling, the entire empire gathered. Thousands of ships hovered in the skies, their lights shining like stars. Lyra walked to the front of the platform, her silver gown flowing behind her. The crowd quieted as she raised her hand. This man, she said, her voice strong and clear, was not born of our world. He had no crown, no power, no army, yet he changed everything. He saved me when I was no one. He gave me a reason to rise. I built this empire in his name, not in mine, because without him, there would be no queen, no freedom, no future. The people bowed, tears in their eyes. Lyra looked up at the statue towering above. I made a promise long ago, she continued softly, to live free no matter what, and I kept it. But now I make a new one, to protect this galaxy as he once protected me. His spirit will live through every act of kindness we show, every injustice we end, every life we save. She placed her hand on the base of the statue and whispered, You're not gone, Ethan, you're part of everything now. That night, after the ceremony, Lyra returned to her garden once more. The stars shimmered like silver dust above her. She closed her eyes and felt the quiet breeze brush her face. For a moment she thought she heard his voice again, soft, calm, familiar. You did well, kid. Her lips trembled and she smiled through her tears. I kept my promise, teacher. The wind carried the scent of the glowing flowers around her. She stood there, gazing at the stars that had once been their road home, and high above Verelian Prime, the monument of a human man shone brightly, his hand forever reaching toward the light, a symbol of hope that would guide generations to come. In every world that once knew chains, people looked to that statue and remembered the story of the man who freed a queen. And somewhere beyond the stars, in the quiet where heroes rest, Ethan Cross smiled.